Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 3 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for madmen. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is Halloween versus Dia de los Muertos. I say versus, but it's really more like a compare and contrast, an educational episode about the differences between cultures, you know? Before I get into the episode, really quickly, I just want to say that Halloween is fast approaching. And if you or someone you know is like super into like spooky, scary, creepy stuff, you should, tell all your friends about this podcast, especially the friends that are also into this sort of thing. It would be really great if I could get a lot of listeners before Halloween. It would be super awesome, and it would be really helpful. This is a spooky season. People are looking for this content. So if anyone's like, I want something scary, and I don't know. I don't know what I want. Just be like, hey, have you heard about Whispers from Below? It's a pretty cool podcast. Anyway, this episode is going to be pretty chill. There's not a whole lot of super disgusting or gross information that I feel like a younger listener wouldn't be able to hear, or that a younger listener would have a hard time hearing. So this should be an okay episode for everybody. I think this is an episode that a lot of people should listen to, because a lot of people kind of clump together Day of the Dead and Halloween, and they're very much not the same holiday, and they're not based around the same thing at all. And we'll get into that, but I feel like a lot of people are very, uneducated about this, and it shows. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So like I said before, we're basically just going to be comparing and contrasting Halloween and Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. As a disclaimer, I don't speak Spanish. I'm not a native Spanish speaker. There's not a lot, but I mean, yeah, there are a lot. It's rooted in like Mexican culture. So there's some Spanish in it that I'm going to be saying. And if I'm butchering how anything is being said, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to make a joke out of it. I'm genuinely trying to pronounce it the way that I think it should be pronounced. But I'm really sorry if anything I say is like mispronounced or anything like that. I mean no disrespect. I'm genuinely really trying. I'm just not good at Spanish, and I don't speak it, and I'm trying here, okay? So first of all, I just want to start out by saying that these are both rooted in very different cultures. Halloween is based more in Celtic traditions, like pagan rituals, whereas Day of the Dead is rooted in more like Mexican culture. But we're going to start by talking about Halloween. So for those of you that are unaware, I don't think Halloween is a thing like pretty much anywhere else, but in the States. But Halloween is basically a day when you dress up all spooky and scary, and you go to people's houses and they give you candy. Pretty chill. But it actually starts back from this really old tradition called Samhain, which is where people would light bonfires and they would have huge feasts and wear costumes to ward off ghosts. Samhain marked the end of the harvest and the end of summer and the start of winter and the cold months, which they, in sort of Celtic culture, associated with death. They assumed that on Samhain, the day when harvest was done and winter was starting, this was the day where, similar to Day of the Dead, where the lines between those that were alive and those that were dead were sort of blurred. So ghosts and ghouls and all sorts of things would be able to court. Fairies, pixies would sort of be able to rise up and come up and sort of visit and see them. So part of what they did for Samhain was light these like huge bonfires, and then they would make animal sacrifices and crop sacrifices that were made to sort of honor these Celtic gods, and also to honor those that had passed, because if you have an angry ghost, you're probably going to be much better or much worse off than if you have a very nice ghost, just kind of makes sense. They had costumes on as the tradition had progressed, which is really interesting to note. The costumes usually had heads and skins of whatever animals they had been hunting earlier that year, or whichever ones they had hunted most recently. So they would wear the heads as like little like hats, and they would have the skins of the animals wrapped around them. So that's sort of like a small basis of like where Halloween has come from. On the other hand, Dia de los Muertos, otherwise known as Day of the Dead, is more of a celebration of life and death within Mexican culture. So, Day of the Dead is a much happier holiday. It's also multiple days. It's not a singular day. It's a much happier holiday. It's not meant to be full of grieving or mourning or scary anything. It's meant to be this joyous celebration, this happy time. It's a multiple day event. And the roots of the holiday are like kind of debated. Like people aren't really clear like how it started. Like people say, oh, it's from this thing or it's from this thing. But nobody can deny that it came from Mexico for sure. But some people say that it's kind of thought to be created by some of the leaders of Mexico at a certain period of time to create sort of like a nationalist. That word has such a bad connotation. Sort of like a pride in their country and their culture, because the Day of the Dead stuff is all kind of rooted in like Aztec mythology. And so they wanted to create like, let's honor the Aztecs and also create this holiday that's specific to us. And it'll be this thing that people will love, and then they'll love the holiday. That's where most people kind of think that it came from. Halloween, going backwards, as like most of us know, involves a lot of like dressing up and getting candy and being scary. Whereas like Day of the Dead is more about like celebrating. There's not as much dressing up. There's not as much candy involved as Halloween. It's more a holiday about giving rather than receiving, if that makes sense. I feel like Halloween nowadays is way more about like, I want candy, I want prizes, I want, all this stuff. And Day of the Dead is way more centered around just giving to those who have already passed and giving them things that they might not be able to get in the afterlife, The biggest difference that I can say between them is one is a scarier holiday, a spookier holiday, more of a selfish holiday, and the other one is definitely a happier holiday. It's selfless. One is selfish, one is selfless, one is scary, one is happy, The offerings, quote unquote, are very similar. So Halloween, the offering, how I'm wording it, is that they give candy out to children. We all know this. For those of you listening that are from the States, I mean, most of my listener base is in the US. You know that like you get candy. You're a kid, you get candy. That's kind of how it works. Even as an adult, all the candy prices like go way down right after Halloween. So I'm sure as an adult, I mean, I'm kind of an adult. I always go and pick up like bags of candy just for me. Like I don't trick or treat anymore. That's sort of a thing. I don't know, like what age is the cutoff for that? Wait, we need to take a pause here. Because I feel like there's no designated age of like you cannot trick unless maybe there is. But I feel like there isn't. Like you can pretty much trick or treat as long as you want. But I feel like there's like an age where you're like, oh, that's baby stuff. Like I'm done. But like what age, unless there are certain towns maybe that have like rules about like you cannot trick or treat if you're above the age of like blank. I don't know. What age is that a cutoff? I think for me, I probably stopped at like 13. No, 14. I trick or treated at 13. No, I trick or treated at 14 because I trick or treated in Houston. Maybe 15? Did I stop at 15? I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know. Shoot me a message. Let me know, like, when do you think the cutoff is for trick-or-treating? Sorry, that was a tangent, but I just, like, had that thought. Anyway, Day of the Dead is the offerings that they give are gifts on graves. It's not so much a house-to-house getting gifts scenario. it's more of a giving offerings to the graves, kind of like what we talked about before. And candy really isn't as heavily involved in that holiday as it is in Halloween. Speaking of candy, great segue, Justin. Um, the candy giving actually developed again from these Celts. There was this sort of ritual that developed where kids would dress up as like the souls of these like Celtic gods or those who had passed, like ghosts. And they would go door to door and people would give them food as offerings in order to appease the gods. So that's sort of where that came from, but they normally gave them like food or like crops. And then over time, it sort of progressed into this capitalist candy sort of scenario rather than like fruits and vegetables and stuff, or like meat. The grave offerings in Day of the Dead are much more straightforward. And it's all just about giving gifts to loved ones beyond the grave. Toys for children is a big one. Tequila for adults is a big one, like mezcal, stuff like that. And they leave these on the ofrenda. I think that's how you say that. Again, I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to be disrespectful here. Which is, it's just like altar, like the altar of those that have passed, whether that be their grave. Sometimes people have ofrenda like in their home, as a way of like honoring them all year. But most of the time it's like at the grave site, you leave stuff for them. They would clean and decorate graves. I say would, people still do this. I mean, they clean and decorate graves. A really big decoration key point is marigolds. Mexican marigolds are really brightly colored and they have this very, very like pungent scent. And the aroma and the colors are thought to help guide lost souls to their families on this day when the lines are sort of blurred. Similar to Halloween, Day of the Dead is thought, they have a similar thought of like loved ones come back and they celebrate with you the life that they had. And so the lines are very blurred. And so in order to help them come back and find their way, the flowers are thought to help because the aroma is so pungent and the colors are so bright and vivid. They think that it sort of helps people get back, which I think is really cool. They normally have picnics by the graves, or they have feasts, by the ofrenda. And they often leave out pillows and blankets. I don't know if people still do this today. But back when it was, being celebrated, way back when, they would leave pillows and blankets out so that when their loved ones would come back, they would have a place to rest because they would have had a very long and arduous journey. They make food for those that have passed, but the live people still eat it. But what's really interesting is that they wait till the end of the night. So they'll cook all this food and they'll kind of leave it for, their quote unquote loved ones, their past loved ones to eat. And then they eat it as well. And even though they know that the food is there and that they're eating it, they say that it doesn't have nutritional value anymore. It's empty food. There's nothing in it anymore because they've sucked the nutrients out of the food. Food that's like super popular during this time are sugar skulls, which is where we sort of get that like makeup from, like the skull makeup that people always do, and it's really brightly colored, or it's got the flowers around the eyes, stuff like that. That's sort of where we get it from, are the sugar skulls. Tamales are super popular. And this sweet bread that's like shaped in a bun shape with like sugar on top. It's called pan de muerto. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering this. But basically it's just like a sweet bread. And they put sugar and stuff on top in like the shape of bones and stuff like that. These are really commonly made. They're really commonly given. It's more of a day that's about like traditional Mexican food, as well as whatever the deceased person had loved. So like, let's say you're planning this day and you're like, oh, what do I got to get from the store to make for Day of the Dead, like, grandpa really, really loved, I don't know, grandpa really loved blueberry muffins. Great. So on the day you make tamales, you make whatever, you also make blueberry muffins. And you leave them at the grave for your grandpa. This holiday, I think, is just, it comes across as sort of this very foreign idea and this very like strange thing to Americans because we're used to sort of a scarier, spookier holiday around this time of year, until obviously Thanksgiving, which that's a whole other thing to get into because the roots of it are really awful. But I feel like now Thanksgiving has turned into a pretty decent holiday just about like helping out and getting to know one another. Whereas this holiday, I feel like is just, it's rooted in such a loving place. It's all about just like making sure that if there is an afterlife and your loved one is looking down and whatever, which I know a lot of us believe in, that you're just making them happy and you're making them proud, and you're making them want to be around you, and you're giving them something that they can look forward to. I think it's really sweet and really, really lovely. Anyway, so that holiday is more focused around like Mexican foods, things like that. Whereas Halloween, I feel like, is more centered around candy, and fall flavors like apple, pumpkin, caramel is a really big one. I feel like those are sort of the flavors that we gravitate towards, like those sort of fall, like earthy flavors. Part of that is that some of the Celtic gods that were like worshipped during this time, were also the gods of like apples and like harvest and stuff like that. So way back when they would eat apples as like celebration. And so now we also eat apples. I don't know about you, but I personally hate having to go to the grocery store. It takes up so much of my day when I could be starting a new hobby with that time, like soap carving or collecting the sick bags out of airplanes. With Instacart, it makes grocery shopping fast and easy, all while allowing me to stay in my underwear. Instacart allows you to order all of the things you usually get from your local stores, delivered to your door in as fast as 1 hour. Not only that, but it will also give you smart suggestions for new items based off of your preferences, as well as highlight deals to help you save some money. The shoppers handpick perfect produce and make sure that your eggs get to you safely. You can get free delivery on your first order over $35 by following the link in the show notes. This also lets Instacart know that we sent you, and it helps support Whispers from Below. So if you hate grocery shopping as much as I do, try Instacart today and enjoy getting your groceries the easy way. It's interesting to note that I feel like I don't think Day of the Dead dates back quite as far as Halloween does. But what's interesting to note, even though I think it's sort of like a newer holiday, it's interesting to note that the traditions have stayed so similar. The traditions have stayed pretty much the same. They haven't really changed too much over time. Whereas I feel like Halloween has drastically changed from its original purpose. And Halloween sort of became a Christian, like a Catholic holiday because the church was like pagan shit. We got to put that on a different day. And we got to move that away from us because we're celebrating All Saints Day and like stuff like that. So this will be All Hallows Eve. And that's how we got Halloween. And it had this weird like trajectory. And then it came to the States and now we get candy. Like it was very strange. Whereas I feel like Day of the Dead has sort of remained this nice holiday that's just about like caring about those that have passed. And I don't know. I just think it's interesting to note. Traditions vary. Kind of like they do here in the States, from town to town. So, some towns will do parades. Some of the offerings change town to town. Some towns have like similar Halloween traditions where they'll go door to door and they'll collect offerings to leave on the graves, sort of like getting the candy from, houses and stuff like that. It just depends on, the city that you're in, which I feel like is similar to the States in the sense of like certain towns like have a curfew for Halloween. Certain towns have like certain towns have stuff going on, that I feel like is specific to that town. And it's, it's just cool to note that traditions, even though we all celebrate the same holiday, traditions are so family based or town based or like where you grew up. It's just a cool little way to sort of keep a piece of your like childhood or like where you grew up like with you as you go. For those of you, I know I mentioned a little bit in the beginning who like aren't from the United States. I realized I pretty much talked this whole thing like about it. So just as like a little note of like this is what it is. Basically, Halloween is a really spooky time. It's October 31st, every single year. We dress up. Normally as you're a kid, you go trick-or-treating. You go to people's houses, they have bowls of candy. You knock on the door, you say trick or treat, and then they give you candy. And you always try to find the houses with like the biggest candy or the quote unquote like best candy. I remember when I was growing up, I grew up sort of, I wouldn't say in the middle of nowhere, but like we were out there. So I didn't really have like a neighborhood of my own to trick or treat at. So I would always go to friends' houses and then I would do the loop with them in their like neighborhood. But yeah, it's a holiday where like scary and creepy and weird is sort of like honored. There's a debate about whether or not like I feel like as a kid, I always thought it was so cool when people bought their costumes because I was like, oh, you must be rich. You bought your costume. But then as I've gotten older, like I love making costumes and creating them and like making them my own. I sort of treat Halloween as like a time when I can cosplay in public and not be stared at is like kind of how I look at Halloween now. But that's basically what it is. It's one of my favorite holidays. It's probably my favorite holiday. I like it more than I like Christmas. I like it more than I like Thanksgiving. It's a time of year where things like this that I love, scary, spooky, creepy, weird, offbeat, are like honored and people want that and love it and celebrate it. And I feel like you don't get that any other time of year. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway, if you want to know, it's not really like a accurate film. But for those of you that are looking for more like Day of the Dead, like cultural stuff to consume, if you haven't already, the 2017 film, I think it was 2017, right? Yeah, 2017 film, Coco. I think it's a Disney Pixar movie, or maybe it's just Pixar. Coco. It's one of those movies that'll make you cry. It is so heartfelt and so well done. And I feel like from people that I have talked to that actively celebrate Day of the Dead and they are a part of that community and that culture, they think that Coco was well done and did not disrespect it. It didn't ruin the culture. It didn't make fun of it. It honored it in such a great way. And when I saw it, I sobbed and I loved it. The music from it is great. The visuals are wonderful. Definitely check it out. If you haven't, add it to your sort of like Halloween movie list that you might have. I know I always have movies I watch near Halloween, like Nightmare Before Christmas. I always try to watch Halloween either the night before or the day of Halloween. I always try to watch that. People really love Hocus Pocus. There's stuff like that. I definitely think Coco should be added to that list. It's a fantastic film. I'm not entirely sure where you can find it. You can probably find it on Disney Plus. Or like Amazon Video that has like literally everything. But definitely watch it. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Please go check it out. And that's pretty much all I have today. Sort of a shorter episode. Definitely one that's more me just kind of giving my 2 cents about it. But I just feel like this is an important topic. I feel like a lot of people sort of clump together, especially, and I'm not trying to like be that guy, but especially white people will try to clump together Halloween and Dia de los Muertos as like the same holiday. They're like, oh, it's like the Mexican version of Halloween. And it's not. I mean, just in the basic description of them, they're not the same thing at all. They're completely different holidays, and they should be celebrated differently. They should be honored differently. They should be looked at differently. I forgot to say it at the start of this episode, but this is an idea that was given to me by a fan of the show and also a friend of mine. Her name's Emma Martin. Sorry for not plugging you earlier in the episode. But she is a really great person, and she was like, you should educate people about this because it's something that I feel like we run into every year is people being like, for Halloween, I'm going to do like sugar skull makeup and it's going to be great. And it's like, well, actually, you're kind of like appropriating a cultural holiday into your holiday. Like that maybe shouldn't be something we do. Whereas like I did, I think, what was that, 2 years ago maybe? Yeah, 2 years ago. I did like a skull, but I sort of did it as though it was done in like pop art. And I feel like that was an acceptable way of like going about Halloween, but like with minimal effort. Whereas I feel like doing sugar skull makeup and saying that it's a Halloween makeup is kind of misleading, because that's not what it's for. They kind of are synonymous, but they're so different. Like I feel like I personally, after learning so much about it, like I would never say I'm gonna do sugar skull makeup as a Halloween thing because I feel like that's wrong and incorrect to clump them together when they are so vastly different. Anyway, that's me getting on my high horse. Thank you, Emma Martin, for this episode idea. If you haven't already, please go check out the website. It's www.whispersfrombelow.com. We've got all sorts of new merch on there, all sorts of cool merch. You can download episodes there. There's a contact page. If you have ideas for future episodes, you get a shout out during the episode. And when I post a picture on my Instagram, I tag you on Instagram for it. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. It's pretty awesome. You should definitely at least go send me a message of episode ideas. I love hearing from people, and I'd love to get to the point where like every week I'm just doing something that a fan has asked for. I mean, that's kind of where I wanted this to go. And then every once in a while I'll be like, I wanted to do this, so I'm going to do it. But let me know what you guys think. If you want to see more movie episodes, if you want to see more, LOL, this is a podcast. If you want to hear more movie episodes, if you want to hear more stuff about that, someone just gave me a really great idea for like an actual like video. So I do have a YouTube channel for this podcast. It's Whispers from Below. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing, like the usual. But I only really upload episodes there with just like the logo as the background. But somebody gave me this really cool idea. My roommate actually gave me this really cool idea to maybe do like I do a spooky makeup look and I talk about a spooky thing that happened. So you're more like with me as I'm talking about it, which I thought could be a really cool idea. So if you guys are interested in seeing something like that or like a scary makeup tutorial or something like that, because I love makeup, shoot me a message. Let me know. That could be something that I do in the future. If you want to follow anything about the podcast, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Whispers from Below, no spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. I try to post at least a couple times a week on there to keep everybody interested. I post pictures of merch. I post stuff from the website. I post pictures about the episode. If an episode isn't going up, I upload something there to let you know that it's not happening. So that's probably the best place to go check it out. If you're interested in my life personally, you can go check out my personal Instagram, which is at JUTIN_geese, like the animal. And basically it's just me and makeup, my dog, my boyfriend. That's pretty much all my Instagram is at this point, is like me doing makeup, and then occasionally it's my boyfriend or my dog. So if you're interested in anything like that, please go check it out. That's pretty much it. Remember, Halloween involves candy. Dia de los Muertos involves loving the people that have died and not just getting candy for yourself. And please keep wearing a mask. If you do decide to celebrate Halloween this year, please be safe about how you're doing it. COVID is not gone. It's still here. It's dangerous. Please be safe. Wear masks. Be conscious about who you're hanging out with and being with, and make sure that you are completely and 100% safe this year.